Okie dokie. So I think that it may come as no surprise that a lot of people probably don't pay attention to a lot of the stuff that's going on the PTR in regards to Season 2 Mythic Plus, or the stuff that you do read. It's just relevant to headlines. Now, with that being said, there's actually a decent amount of stuff that is changing for Season 2 Mythic Plus, and I'm going to be talking about some of the most important things that you need to know going into Season 2 that's going to be the most helpful. The most pertinent of stuff that I'm going to talk about in the video is going to be linked down in the description to help you guys out. And I guess without further ado, let's start with the first thing that I want to discuss. And the first thing that you need to know about Season 2 Mythic Plus, I think that this tweet is actually going to be super helpful, especially for early dungeons. Reload does a great job of making weak auras, making MDT routes and stuff like that. I think that before the season starts, if you haven't done any testing on the PTR, and if you don't have any of that stuff going on, I think that grabbing the Reload Season 2 Dungeons Week Aura pack, and then also looking at his routes is going to be super helpful. This will, if you're designing routes, this will help you kind of have like a general foundation for what you're looking to do, and kind of start you off on the right track. On top of that too, the Mythic Plus auto marker has been updated for Dragonflight Season 2. This is also going to be linked down in the description. This is another great utility item that will help mark some of the most important mobs inside of trash packs for you, just to make sure that you are going to be able to just kind of deal with Mythic Plus mobs pretty easily. Okay, and so some people might also not know this, but the Season 2 dungeons are changing. So we no longer have the 8 dungeons that we had previously in Season 1. Instead, we have 8 brand new dungeons, which are Halls of Infusion, Brackenhide Hollow, Uldaman Legacy of Tyr, Neltharius being the Dragonflight dungeons, and then the old Legacy dungeons that are returning are Neltharian's Lair, Freehold, Underrot, and Vortex Pinnacle. And so I think that the best thing I can do is probably give you tips for the Dragonflight style dungeons, and just talk about some things to know about the new dungeons. First off, Halls of Infusion. For the first boss, Mass Dispel is quite good. And also on that first boss, making sure that you have either Lust or your cooldowns for that intermission. It helps him not get stacked up as fast. I think his name is like Watcher or something. In addition to that, the very beginning, you have to make a pretty pivotal decision early on. Left side has a profession-bound cheat death item, where the first time somebody would die, they don't. Assuming that we're within 40 yards of the person who is able to click the cheat death. Alternatively, going to the right unlocks the checkpoint system for the whole entire dungeon, which is a bad checkpoint system. It's similar to, like a King's Rest style checkpoint system, where you still have to run back from the very beginning of the instance, and it's really long. But the downside is the right side has much harder trash than the left side. And so you kind of have to weigh your options in regards to which direction you're going and how much you care about checkpoints. I think in general, especially early on, I would probably elect to go right and just kind of run the gamble with a little bit harder trash. The final tip for Halls of Infusion is last boss. You can CC the ads, but you also need to make sure they don't get a cast off. If they get a cast off, then you will die. And this isn't a cast in the sense of something you can kick. You need to be committing AoE stops to those casts to stop them from going off. For Brackenhide Hollow, Priest can Mind Soothe and open all the cages without you pulling any of the trash, and that's at the very beginning of the instance. This is a combination of both Mind Soothe and Fade, but it allows you to kind of route around the dungeon in an easy manner, assuming that you have a Priest. Additionally, you should go right after the first boss. That's going to be, the left side is like a trash gauntlet. It's going to be a little bit more of a time loss. The trash is also a little bit harder that way. And to the tree boss in Brackenhide, I would feed somebody after the second suck-in. I wouldn't feed somebody necessarily to the first suck-in. And you'll understand what I mean once you make it to that fight. For Neltharius, Magma Tusk is kind of tricky movement-wise. You want to make sure that you are charging him into walls and then doing large movements to get him away from the fire. He gets like an enrage if he's standing in the fire for any extended period of time. And so your movements, you're going to want to charge him in very specific ways. Chargrath, you drag the chain over the boss to stun, and then after 3 chains get dragged over him, he gets stunned. It also puts a dot on your party per chain that is broken on him, and so you want to spread the dot out. You want to make sure that you're not getting multiple stacks of it at once, otherwise you can potentially die. The mini-boss in front of the Forge Master is something that more often than not, in typical seasons, you would be looking to skip that. However, that is one of the most efficient mobs in Dragonflight dungeons, and so that is potentially something that you should be looking to actually play. On top of that, if you have a decurse for the final boss, it is quite nice. If you don't have a decurse, you're not shit out of luck. But what I will say is every single time you pick up a weapon from the pile of gold to help break the shield on the boss, he puts a curse on people. So having a decurse access to a decurse in this dungeon is good. For Uldaman, Bromac, every single time he summons a totem, that should be your top priority. The Earthen Weavers, they do a cast that needs to be kicked, and they also do a Hail of Stone ability that needs to be either CC'd or stopped. Those mobs are very dangerous, and they're after the second boss area. Talandris, which is the snake-looking fella, it can get stunned by character stuns, which is like Infernal, Kidney Shot, Blasphemy, and he gets stacked up over time with an Enrage. Whenever he gets all 3 of his stacks removed, he gets stunned. Be really careful with things like Infernal. If you're playing with like a Destro Lock, or say you have a stun, I would recommend maybe not even using them and just utilize the circles on the ground to stun the boss. For the Golem, his name is Embryon. Make sure that you stack up whenever the intermission is happening. The intermission is time-based, and so damage in phase 1 is very relevant just to be able to push the boss a little bit faster, because if you get a second intermission, you're going to lose a significant amount of time, but the best thing you can do is stay stacked to where your healer is able to heal you. And then the final boss, Chrono Lord, he's got some weird shit going on. He does a wing buffet into a time spiral mechanic, and the time spiral mechanic is a debuff that can either be mass dispelled or freedomed off. You want to make sure that you remove those as fast as possible. They can also be like just single dispelled by a healer. You want to make sure that you remove those as fast as possible to make sure that it doesn't line up with the wing buffet cast, and the wing buffet AoE is pretty sketch. Okay, so let's talk about the old dungeons. I think the old dungeons are quite a bit easier than the new dungeons. I would say on average they are 1 to 3 key levels easier, and I think that Underrod, in my experience, is the one that is by far the easiest. Now Freehold is also quite a bit easier than some of the other Dragonflight dungeons, and that's going to help you early on in the season as you try to progress through dungeons, and as you try to progress just generally. I would say that sticking towards those old legacy dungeons is going to be your best bet for timing the highest level of keys, because keys are being reduced by 10 levels come next week. That was news as of a couple of weeks ago, that keys are going to be reduced by 10 key levels. And so the fastest way to get back up to 20s is honestly by doing these old legacy dungeons and then kind of re-rolling your new keys. Now that's not to be stated that, Brackenhide Hollow is absolutely doable on a 20, and it honestly isn't that bad. But Halls of Infusion and Uldaman, in my experience, are very challenging, especially if you have people who haven't played the PTR extensively. So you need to, I would say the old dungeons tend to be multiple key levels easier. And in addition to that, people have experience playing these dungeons, so they kind of know what to expect, and that helps out a lot. So as for the affixes, first off, what's the deal with the affix rotation? So the affix rotation is not something that is currently known. We don't know what affixes are going to be available next week. They have changed a decent amount about affixes, where Explosive is gone, Grievous is gone, and Quaking is gone. And in their place, we have 3 new affixes, which are Entangling, Afflicted, and Incorporeal. And we can kind of talk about what these affixes look like a little bit. For Entangling, this affix is very easy. It puts that green vine underneath your player model, like you can see on screen right here, and you basically have to walk out of it within 10 seconds. There are weak auras on Wago. I would recommend grabbing a weak aura for Entangling. It makes it very easy if next week is Entangling. For Incorporeal and Afflicted. So Incorporeal and Afflicted kind of work in a similar manner. Afflicted is basically, and we'll start with this one. Afflicted is mobs that spawn that have all typings of Dispel except for magic. So that means that they are a disease, they're a curse, they're a poison. They're all types of Dispel except for magic. And that means that hybrid Dispels, if Afflicted is active, are very potent. In addition to that, 2 Afflicteds can spawn at once, and they have a ICD on how often they can spawn. And the timer currently looks like it is around 30 seconds on that ICD. And so whenever they spawn, you want to make sure that either your healer is going to heal them up to full, or you're going to commit multiple dispels to the mobs. Now, even hybrids can't heal them up to full, but they don't get healed by smart heals, and so like they're only going to be getting healed by direct heals. So that's something that you absolutely have to factor in. I would say that if you have a hybrid in your group, making sure that they talent into their dispel is important, because if these afflicted cries go off like from these mobs that you see on the screen here, then you are going to have a 50% haste reduction. So being aware of these afflicted mobs is important. For Incorporeal, Incorporeal summons these incorporeal beings that cast Destabilize, and they have been pushed to a 45-second ICD that works very similar to Quaking, where it can skip rotations of them. Now, how they work is they are active for 20 seconds at a time and cast an 8-second cast, which is this Destabilize. And if the Destabilize goes off, then you have 50% reduced healing and 50% reduced damage. And so it's very, very bad. And this debuff can stack. Now, how you deal with this is you can either kick it, and if you kick it, it actually has no lockout duration, so it starts recasting immediately. So you'd have to commit 2 kicks minimum to being able to deal with this. And likely you would end up committing 3 kicks. But just for the point of this video, 2 kicks minimum. Alternatively, you can commit single target CCs, such as things like Kidney Shot, Gouge, Fell Eruption. Single target CCs work on these mobs. AoE CCs do not. And so things like Shockwave, Leg Sweep are not going to hit these incorporeal beings. Now, the most important thing to know about these incorporeal beings is they have all typing, meaning that all CCs work on them. And so these are things such as Scare Beast for Hunter, Hibernate from Druid, Shackle Undead from Priest, Turn Evil also works on them. You can banish them, you can fear them. All CCs, all single target CCs work on these mobs. And so some CCs are not made equal in regards to what you're expected to use on incorporeals, where the spammable ones, such as, like I stated earlier, Scare Beast, Hibernate, Turn Evil, Shackle Undead, those are some of the most potent CCs in the game. And typically what you do is you have 2 people who are more or less assigned to be dealing with the incorporeals. As you want to say, I'm playing with the Holy Paladin, they're going to be calling out that they're turn eviling one, and I'm going to be calling out that I'm hibernating the other. And if we need other help from other players, it is kind of expected that you have these CCs available, but you're not always going to be throwing them. There are certain classes, such as Warrior and Death Knight, that have no real way of dealing with them at all. And so, in general, and this goes for both incorporeal and afflicted. And so the fact that Warrior and DK can't really deal with these incorporeals is quite bad, but that's just something that you have to know if you're playing with those classes, is that they're likely not going to be helping you in any meaningful capacity. Okay, without dragging this out too much longer, that's going to be it for all of the things that I think you need to know for Season 2 Dragonflight Dungeons, at least the most important things, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.